Watch this.
The Supreme Court reversed Roe 4 years ago, a move that triggered total abortion bans in several states, including here in Idaho. But that could change this fall, a decision we now know will be up to you, the voters. As for that initiative, it's not the only one expected to be on your ballot come November. Lawmakers have 3 items they want you to vote on, issues that involve who can make marijuana legal and the official gun for the state. The path to healing isn't straightforward, but it can include a line of sorts. After time serving their country, a group of women are finding peace and recovery in the water. Well, we now know what initiatives will be on your ballot in November. Perhaps the biggest question will be the Reproductive Freedom and Privacy Act. Just hours ago, the Secretary of State's office officially confirmed it did get enough verified signatures to make the ballot. So here to explain what comes next is Justin Cork.
Well, Hunter, what comes next, for voters at least, is Election Day. The Reproductive Freedom and Privacy Act will appear on your ballot in Idaho and across every ballot on the state. Supporters say it would establish a fundamental right to make personal reproductive health decisions, including access to contraception, fertility care, and abortion care. Bottom line, they say it would effectively end Idaho's current abortion ban. If you're like, well, this is a very conservative state, so there's no way they're going to get a majority of people to actually vote for that in November. Well, the executive director of the organization behind it says they got almost 80,000 signatures from people all across the state to get this thing on the ballot, and they saw support crossing party lines.
We knocked 66,000 doors, and I would say almost entirely outside of Boise. Sometimes you hear people say, oh yeah, sure, like this can succeed in Boise. Well, guess what? We got signatures from everywhere. We qualified 20 legislative districts, and only 4 of those were entirely in Boise. What we've found out in communities and out on doors is that no matter a person's partisanship, there is a deep mistrust of the government, of the motives of politicians who created this ban in the first place, and the extremists who pushed the ban.
Now, if you're also like, well, I know we have a very conservative legislature, and can't they just repeal this even if voters do pass it in November? You are right. In fact, the Idaho Republican Party's Resolutions Committee just resolved that, quote, the Idaho Republican Party affirms the sanctity of human life from the moment of conception, and goes on to say it also, quote, affirms the authority of the Idaho legislature to amend or repeal voter-approved ballot initiatives through the lawful exercise of its legislative power, and calls upon its elected representatives to exercise such authority should the proposed reproductive rights ballot initiative be approved by the voters, end quote. But Falwell says they're ready to fight in the legislature as well if they have to.
They absolutely have the power to, after passage, overturn the will of the people this coming January. And we will do everything in our power to prevent that from happening.
But they have a long road until November, so Falwell says they're focused on that right now.
Okay, and Republicans can wait for January to repeal it if it passes, right?
Yes, and as I'm sure a lot of people know, they have a super majority, not just a majority, a super majority right now, which may change a little in November, but most experts say they'll absolutely keep that majority after the election.
It's one of those tough things where, you know, you can get it on the ballot, but will it remain if it passes? And
then even pass.
Yeah.
And then what? Yeah.
And then what is something that we're going to talk about here in a second. But first, I'm going to transition to this. All right, you can expect more than Reproductive and Privacy Act on your November ballot. State lawmakers have 3 more issues that they're asking you to vote on this general election. First up, remember the effort to put medical marijuana before Idaho voters? Well, it never made the ballot after supporters fell short of gathering enough valid signatures. But now lawmakers want to make sure the question stays in their hands. Who should have the ability to legalize marijuana in Idaho? A vote yes for HJR 4 would create a constitutional amendment that only the legislature can do that. They would also have authority over narcotic and any other psychoactive substances. So it would stop anything like the Idaho Medical Cannabis Act from happening. A vote against this measure means people would still hold the power when it comes to creating that type of initiative. Legislators did pass this resolution in 2025, but it will be on your 2026 ballot.
We seek to give the legislature the same power over these drugs as we have on liquor. The lethality of drugs was not an issue again in 1934. We just didn't have that issue. Now we do, and so we're getting with the times.
Next up, should English be the official state language? If HJR 6 passes, it would create a provision in the Idaho Constitution making it so This resolution also passed last year.
What this does is bring us into line with what is going on federally and what I believe should be going on in the state of Idaho. And I was a little bit surprised that it wasn't really going on. And even in our statute, the things that are in the statute weren't really being accurately followed. Over the last 100 years, there's been about, on average, 700 to 800,000 people who have come into our country through the nationalization process, and required by them is to be able to manage to speak English and to write English and to learn other things about our country, regardless of what state they enter into. And I think this just secures that this would secure the American culture in Idaho and lead us down and cement this into our Constitution and lead us down the correct path.
Last but certainly not least, the official state gun of Idaho. It's nothing that could possibly enter the state constitution, but a question posed by lawmakers so you can have a say in what firearm best represents the state.
We've got a lot of state items, state birds and state, I think we even had in state affairs at one time, we were talking about a state pie flavor. I don't know if that one ever made it, but I know we've talked about a lot of different things, but we don't have a state gun, and a lot of states do have state guns, and Idaho should have a state gun.
Those options of guns are right there on your screen, but how you answer this question is not the final answer. The legislature will still need to make a state law designating Idaho's official gun. So it's official. There will be some new questions for you on the ballot this November. For more than 100 years, Idahoans have had the constitutional right to write their own laws, but nearly every generation has debated just how hard that should be. In 1912, Idaho voters approved an amendment to the state constitution, and it gave people the authority to put initiatives on the ballot. The idea was that if lawmakers wouldn't act, the people could. That passed, but it took 21 years for the legislature to create a process and explain how these initiatives and referendums would work. The process gave voters a new way to shape Idaho law, but it also showed that what voters pass can sometimes change years later. Like in 1994, when there was a voter initiative to set term limits for elected officials. It passed in 1994, but not all elected officials were thrilled by this. So come 2000, during the GOP convention, delegates ultimately decided they wanted to repeal what voters decided. By 2002, the Idaho legislature passed a bill repealing the past voter initiative of setting these term limits. It was vetoed by Governor Dirk Kempthorne, but the legislature overturned that veto. And then the 2002 proposition was on the ballot and narrowly approved by voters by about 2,000 votes, which repealed the legislature's term limits. The topics of these ballot measures change, and so has the process of getting an initiative in front of voters. Originally, sponsors only had to collect signatures equal to 6% of voters statewide. Well, that changed in 2013 when lawmakers added a geographic requirement, meaning support had to come from multiple regions of the state, not just Idaho's largest cities. Sponsors must gather signatures equal to 6% of registered voters statewide, plus 6% of registered voters in at least 18 of Idaho's 35 legislative districts. But it's also important to note what happened in 2021. Lawmakers passed a bill to increase the requirement, so instead of 18 legislative districts, they would need signatures from all 35 districts, making Idaho's process one of the nation's toughest. But ultimately, the Idaho Supreme Court struck that law down, saying the legislature can regulate the initiative process but cannot make the constitutional right so difficult that it effectively disappears. Since then, legislators have repeatedly introduced proposals aimed at changing the Constitution itself so stricter rules could survive judicial review. So the ballot initiative, where Idaho voters will decide whether to reinstate abortion access or not. If voters approve that this November, it still could face action at the state house, like we mentioned earlier. This summer, Idaho Republican Party delegates passed a resolution calling on GOP lawmakers to amend or repeal the measure should it pass. Whether that happens, again, would be up to the legislature during a future session and would have to go through the normal lawmaking process. But so you know, there is that possibility too. Now to the 4-1 on the 208. An Ontario man is in custody after police say he attacked a woman on the Boise Greenbelt over the weekend. Officers say it happened Saturday night around 11 o'clock near South Ferguson Street. They say a woman was walking alone on the Greenbelt when 26-year-old Javier Ortiz allegedly approached her from behind, pulled her off the path, and assaulted her. Police say it was a random attack. With this being the second attack on the Greenbelt in the last week, lots of people are now worried about the safety on the Greenbelt. As for the suspect in the latest attack, Ortiz was booked into Ada County Jail on felony charges of aggravated assault and second-degree kidnapping. The Idaho Transportation Department is starting a paving project at the Franklin Road interchange, which means nighttime ramp closures for you start tonight. Only one ramp will close at a time from 9 p.m. until 5 a.m. That happens overnight. The one shaded in orange and yellow is the one closing tonight and tomorrow night, followed by the eastbound on-ramp Wednesday and Thursday. And Sun Valley is now making history, not for its ski slopes, but for its night skies. Sun Valley Resort has become the first resort in the U.S. to earn dark sky certified resort status. The designation recognizes the resort's efforts to reduce light pollution, helping preserve some of Idaho's best stargazing. And that's the 4-1 on the 208. Teach someone to fish, and you'll feed them for a lifetime. But for a group of anglers, time in the water means a lot more than being fed. Coming up, how women are finding peace after replacing a weapon with a fishing rod. Plus, a time of healing from another war. People made the annual pilgrimage to Minidoka this weekend, where Japanese Americans were forced into concentration camps during World War II. Among those incarcerated, a hero emerged. We remember his story. Easing your mind, it can be a tall task for any of us, and the ways that we find inner peace is really different for everyone. Maybe it's putting on your favorite movie, meeting a friend, or even just going for a run. But for those who served in our nation's military, relationships with others and their own minds can be hard to navigate. For some Treasure Valley women who served, the path to healing doesn't run through sit-downs in a counselor's chair. It runs right through the waters of Idaho. Cooper Morgan casts us out.
Escaping the noise of everyday life. All it takes is a step. and a line for the streams of water to fill your head.
I always liked fishing since I was little. When I went in the military, I still had a fishing rod. Like I was stationed in Anchorage, Alaska, and got to fish the lakes up there, but I'd never done any like fly fishing.
Jacqueline Rutan spent 17 and a half years in the Air Force.
So I went in 2000 and then medically retired in September of 2017.
And it wasn't all water off a duck's back.
I struggle a lot with my mental health and, medication and doing, whatever your therapist tells you. It only gets so far, right?
After the uniform came off, she needed connection.
Corey, I'm surprised you don't have a dry fly on.
And she found it in a women veterans fly fishing group called Sisters on the Rise.
We once in a while will catch things too, so that's an extra bonus on top. But for most of us, it's about being out on the water, being with one another.
The subgroup is part of a larger body of water, Project Healing Waters, a national nonprofit that focuses on connections and healing with veterans.
It gives veterans a place where they can come and connect with another group and kind of have that shared experience, that they all kind of have that unspoken story.
For women like Jack, it's not just a day trip. It's a small group, a safe space, where every cast comes with camaraderie.
And Corey's not a veteran, but I feel like she is. Her husband is. She really fits in. She understands and is sympathetic, and creating that safe space is like so important for me.
Enough that today, Jack isn't just learning. She's teasing her mentor about her fly choice.
Any bumps? Nothing?
Why don't you get a dry fly out there? Go over here.
Out here, there are tangles, skunk days, and fish that get away. But Jack says that's not what this is really about.
Being out, just listening to life, seeing, it seems like everywhere we go, we see some kind of wildlife. Like we've seen several osprey.
Standing beside each other, in the water, among the trees, even without conversation. A quiet understanding that this can help more than any prescription alone.
Been really helpful. Like my mental health has been better than it ever has been.
Trading the noise for boots and a rod, and the sound of a river that doesn't ask questions.
A lot of times it's about the experience, just being out there.
Me and Sandy didn't catch anything this trip out. I mean, Boise River, come on, who has caught something there? Not me. But they have taken trips out to the Owyhees and plan to go to eastern Idaho next year, South Fork of the Snake River area, further away from the busy city. But Sisters on the Rise again is a women's group under Project Healing Waters, and Healing Waters has 160 programs across the country.
I mean, you just talked about it. I've gone fly fishing a few times. It is healing, right? You get that moment of just kind of that inner peace. It's quiet, right?
Yeah, Hunter. I always like to say, have you ever seen the movie A River Runs Through It? That movie kind of exemplifies kind of what you feel when you're out there fishing. I fly fish down down the river from Lucky Peak Dam, and it's so pretty out there, especially as the sun's setting and just healing, and that's what this program is really aimed at doing.
And it's not just this one specifically women, but they have even more.
Yeah, even more. So the Veterans Home actually they actually tie flies, and that's men as well. All vets are welcome, and their info will be on our web story at ktvb.com.
Awesome story, Coop. Love to see that. Thank you. Well, this weekend, dozens of people gathered at the Minidoka National Historic Site for an annual pilgrimage. Survivors and family members of those incarcerated at the concentration camp paid their respects to remember a painful past. More than 13,000 Japanese Americans, most from the West Coast, were imprisoned at the former concentration camp during World War II. And one of those Japanese Americans is also being remembered today by the U.S. military for being a hero. Private First Class William Nakamura left the camp in 1943 with his brother to serve in World War II. William was assigned with the platoon in Italy, and that's where his group became cornered by enemy gunfire. William fired back, allowing his platoon to escape, but he was killed in this effort. Today, he's being remembered as a hero and was awarded the Medal of Honor after his death in 2000.
Well, you've likely noticed clouds overhead off and on throughout the day today. That's courtesy of monsoon moisture that has begun streaming in from the south. That moisture and the cloud cover attempting to create a few rain showers over central and southern Idaho. I think a lot of this is probably ending up being virga, which is rain that leaves the base of the cloud but evaporates before it hits the ground. But that virga, even though it doesn't turn into rain, can create some gusty outflow winds. So we could have some breezy conditions at times tonight. We're in the 90s, mid 90s again here in the Boise area. Tomorrow morning with clouds in place overnight, we will be in the mid 70s again, just like this morning at 8 o'clock in the morning. But daytime highs tomorrow will be held down by more persistent cloud cover. So I think we'll land right around 90 for most Treasure Valley spots for your Tuesday. But as the lower levels of the atmosphere get more and more saturated tonight into tomorrow, I think we'll likely start seeing more widespread rain that will actually reach the ground and potentially some thunderstorms tomorrow. So early in the morning, this is 7 o'clock, we will see rain over eastern Oregon. That will translate to some scattered showers. This is midday, maybe a quick rumble of thunder across the lower elevations, more likely in the mountains where some heavy downpours are possible. After that, though, that's the active weather on Tuesday. We'll be back to the heat by the middle of the week. High temperatures in Boise hit the triple digits again on Thursday.
It's comment time. I brought my stress pen because holy cow, there were so many comments so similar. I just have to say them. Susan Ellen Meridian, it sure sounds like our legislators don't really care about the majority of voters want. Maybe it's time for some new legislators. You usually know I'm funny, but sheesh. She is actually really funny. Okay, Larry also said our Constitution, saying a similar thing, doesn't need changed. Our legislature does. Current legislature brags about less government, but has introduced more wasteful bills than any other legislature to date. Term limits can't come soon enough. And then our next one, Mike and Eagle, overturning the will of the people is not representative form of government. Vote those out of office and elect a better government. Again, saying similar things here, you guys. Then finally, we have CNN in Meridian. It's a lighter note, so we can take that breath of fresh air. We feel voting on the state pie is much more important than the state gun. Maybe a huckleberry pie? I agree. And finally, we have Steve, who says, the 208, my father worked as a carpenter building barracks in the Minidoka camp in the spring of 1942. They were not told what the camp was for, and they thought it was for German POWs, not Japanese American U.S. citizens. That's an incredible story. I would love to know more about that. But again, everybody with a similar message, thanks for your comments. We're seeing a trend.